No, no, no. Now I heard that Batman's just this tall, skinny guy that has a bunch of fake muscles on that people are intimidated by and they don't want to face him. That's what I heard. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the show. So glad to see you all once again. And if you're new here, thank you so much for stopping by because this is the show that I think you might be interested in. If you're like me and grew up on Batman the Animated Series and other cartoons of the 80s and 90s, or you're just a new fan that discovered these classic cartoons now, then you found the right place. We're going back and looking at each and every episode of some of these shows. And right now we're working our way through a series of the new Batman adventures. So if this sounds like something you might enjoy, then hop below and hit the subscribe button. And while you're at it, go ahead and click like and maybe leave a comment. Let me know that this is your first time so I can say hi. And today we're talking about a very cool episode, Legends of the Dark Knight, which originally aired on October 10th, 1998.
Well, if the Dark Knight's on the case, Arson Boy's history.
So this episode, I have to admit, I had no knowledge that this episode even existed. Rightfully so, because actually this date, when I was looking at it, October 10th, 1998, is one day before Marcy P., the movie that I made in high school, premiered. And actually, I think, if I remember correctly, October 10th was going to be the premiere date, but some of the people in the cast weren't able to be there. And so we moved it up a day because it was at somebody's house and we were all friends, so we could move the premiere of the movie. So I was a little busy around this time, but I had no idea that this episode existed. And truly, when I was younger, I don't know if I would have appreciated this episode as much as I do now. But we'll talk all about that right after our 60-second Joker Bomb rundown of the episode. I think I might be able to do that for this episode, but that's not a bad thing. But I'll explain. Let me just tell you what this episode's about real quick. Three kids are walking around Gotham talking about how cool Batman is and these arson fires that are coming in and Batman is going to save the day. And one of the kids says that he thinks that Batman's not even human. He's more bat than man. And one of the kids says, oh no, I know the real story because my uncle met him when he was a security guard at this music store. And they tell the story about how he was at the store and then Joker and his henchmen came in to rob the place and Batman and Robin saved the day. And they were all very nice and chummy and happy and all that. And then the girl says, oh, that's not what happened. The Batman is actually much older than you think, and Robin's really a girl, and she tells the story about how Batman was at war with this mutant clan, and then in present day they see what they think is Batman flying over, and they go and follow this creature into the abandoned theater, and it turns out to be Firefly, and they shine their flashlight, bat symbol up in the air, and before the battery dies, Batman comes in and saves the day and takes them, and they're all happy that Batman is as cool as they thought he was. Now, see, I told you I finished it, but that's not a bad thing.
Mother always said I had talent.
Usually when I am able to accomplish the task of telling the synopsis in 60 seconds, it means that it's not a very good episode because the story's weak. And really, this episode, there's not a lot of story to it. But the real star of this is in how they do it. The style that they took to do this is so much fun. Each of the stories that the kids tell is animated and done in a completely different style. In fact, they have a different voice actor speaking for Batman in each of the iterations. They even have a different voice actor speak for Joker.
Call the police so they can round up these clowns.
Which is just such a cool motif. The first one, which I guess is actually the second story, the first kid tells his interpretation of what Batman is, but they don't really actually show anything.
He's like a giant pterodactyl beast with big fangs and talons.
That's a little bit of a disappointment. I wish they would have actually showed what his version of the story was. But we do this flashback to the kind of the 50s style Batman, and it pulls a lot from the original comic, the debut issue of Batman with Joker coming on over the radio.
Joker's stealing laughter and Batman's going down.
But there's also a lot of influence of the 60s Batman show. And the style of animation is just totally different. There's no shading on them. It's done in a very 50s style. The design of the Joker is different and done more like he was in the comics at that period. And Batman and Robin are more of a bubbly kind of look to their character. It's so much fun to watch.
We got your clue about stealing laughter. The comedy is finished.
And that's what I mean. When I was younger, I don't know if I would have appreciated that, but I so appreciate it now as the nostalgic factor and more of a fan of the older style of Batman. And it just plays into all those kind of feels.
I'm not done fiddling with them yet.
The show is just chocked full of little Easter eggs. I mean, even the store that they go into is the Walker Music Store, obviously named after Shirley Walker, who does the music for the show. So there's just tons of those little elements sprinkled throughout the show.
Now we're gonna make our own clown cry.
And then the next story is taken directly from considered one of the greatest Batman stories, graphic novels in his history, Legends of the Dark Knight story, which was done by Frank Miller, who did Sin City and 300 and some of those darker, grittier types of stories. And it tells the story of Batman, of an older Batman, and kind of Gotham in the future. And again, the animation that they do in that is pulled directly from that graphic novel.
They don't even wait for an order. Kids these days.
Which is kind of cool because that's a very adult comic, but they do a nice job of kind of bridging the gap and putting it in an animation. Now, obviously, more recently, an animated movie came out of that story, The Dark Knight Returns. Yeah, it's The Dark Knight Returns. Sorry, The Dark Knight Returns, and I believe it's a two-parter, which maybe I'll do a review of that someday because that is really a great movie. But like I said, I didn't even know this existed, that wasn't the first time that they animated that series. And that was written in the 80s. So this style of animation and the characters designs that they have in there, again, are a very 80s style to that.
Come out and face your death like a man.
And they have Michael Ironside speaking for Batman in this one, who obviously is also speaks for Darkseid in the Superman stories.
I'm the surgeon.
And Kevin Michael Richardson speaks for the Mutant. And later in the Batman, I think it is, he speaks for the Joker. So again, just these great little tie-ins.
Hey, Gotham City is mine!
Backing up a little bit, in the opening title card, they do give credit to Bill Finger and Frank Miller, respectively, for these versions of the story. And obviously Frank Miller that wrote The Dark Knight Returns, and that makes a lot of sense. Bill Finger, who was one of the original, at this time was known as one of the original writers of the Batman stories in the comics. But since this episode came out, there was a book that came out about Bill Finger and then a documentary that was made based on the book. And really what it was about, and I highly recommend those, and I may do a full review on that book in the future, but what it talks about is how Bill Finger really was kind of not given as much credit as he should have been. It always says Batman created by Bob Kane, and Bob Kane obviously was the artist and the originally thought up the idea of Batman. But it was Bill Finger that really, in those early writings of Batman, created Batman as we know it. I mean, Gotham City and Commissioner Gordon and the Joker and the Penguin and Riddler and all these villains. And he was the architect of everything, of a lot that we know and love about Batman. Even the design, even though Bob Kane drew him, Bill Finger really influenced the design of Batman and made it more of a cape instead of the rigid wings and different things. It's a fascinating documentary. You got to watch it. I think it's on Amazon Prime. And I think because of the documentary and some of this work that this author of the book did, Bill Finger has long passed away. But they are now, if you watch anything new with Batman, they were finally able to get DC and Warner Brothers to recognize Bill Finger as a co-creator of Batman. So things you see now, and I think it started with Batman versus Superman, but now you see everything, wherever it says Batman created by Bob Kane, it also includes Bill Finger. So fascinating story, but this was before all of that, where they just saw Bill Finger as a writer, and one of the early writers of Batman. Obviously influenced the story for this episode. But anyway, I may do a full video talking about Bill Finger because I just find it fascinating that this information has now surfaced, and it's nice to see that he's gotten his due credit.
Oh, very good. I'll have to make a note of that.
So this is not an uncommon storytelling technique, especially in Batman, where they kind of have these three versions of the story going on and how they all perceive Batman. This was done in POV in the original Batman the Animated Series. The story is a little bit deeper. It wasn't just about their interpretation of Batman, but it was seeing Batman through different eyes. Gotham Knights, if you remember that anthology series that came out, I don't know, early 2000s, that was a series of different stories about Batman done by anime filmmakers. And one of those stories, I think it might be the first one, I think it's called Have I Got a Story for You, which is kind of in the same vein where different people are telling their interpretation of how they see Batman. And I think that works so well with the Batman story because he is a little bit more myth than and legend than he is factual, and that's part of his drive, is that he instills fear, and he's very mysterious, and people don't know who he is and what's going on. And again, we know so much about Batman now that it's, as an audience, it's hard to perceive that element. So it's neat when they lean into that in the stories.
Well, like I said, that's how he tells it.
But I was reading that when Bruce Timm submitted this story to be done as an episode, he was completely unaware that this was a story very similar to what they had done in the comics in the 70s. And throughout the process of making this episode, the crew and staff would not let him live that down, that he inadvertently stole this story. But it's very excusable. I mean, think about, 80 years of Batman stories. You're bound to land on some of the very similar stories. But I think, again, it's a very obvious style of story to be done for Batman because he is such a mystery, legend, mysterious. Woo.
And that's what Batman's really like.
I mean, if you can't tell, this is just so much fun. It's very exciting, and there's so many little Easter eggs in there. Even in the 50s version that they have, the last shot is Batman and Robin shaking hands, which is like directly from the 60s Batman.
Well done, old chum.
This is one of the great things about doing this YouTube show, is that it's like I was reintroduced to this show, this episode, that if I did see it when I was younger, I didn't connect with it, or I didn't remember it. And seeing it now is like, it's so very cool to see it done now, and plays very much into that nostalgic feeling that I have about Batman. And furthermore, I think that, to me, this is a story and a style of doing this episode, and just the fact that it's done in totally different animation styles, that I have to wonder if the creators and producers of the show knew that their time was limited doing Batman and thought, let's just do this. Let's just, let's not worry about it. Let's just do it because our time is limited. Because this is an episode that really doesn't take itself seriously, and they just kind of have some fun. I could only imagine how much fun it would have been to work on an episode like this.
I love Batman. All those muscles, the tight rubber armor, and that flashy car. I heard it can drive up walls.
So when it comes time to rank this episode, it is really a whole lot of fun and very enjoyable to watch. And it's just neat seeing the different animation styles. I've been recently going back and watching Batman Brave and the Bold, which is done in more of that 50s kind of style. And in fact, the Robin in this episode looks very similar to the Robin in Batman Brave and the Bold. And it's just a fun show, and it's a fun style for totally different reasons. So when I was looking at how to rank this episode, it doesn't necessarily hold up with the other episodes story-wise or content-wise, but it's just a fun style that they do in the episode. So I had to take all that in consideration when I was ranking it. I mean, the feels that I got when I watched it and the excitement and fun that I had watching it made me want to just rank it up at the top. But to be fair, I had to look at all the criteria, And like I said, when I was initially giving the rundown of the episode, it's not a complicated story, but really the standout of this episode is the style in which it's done. So for all those reasons, it falls at the number 7 spot. Maybe a little bit further down on the list than my instincts wanted to put it. But when I compare all the criteria of the episode, it falls just below Growing Pains because, like I said, that is more in the style of the Batman episodes that I enjoy, where it has a great story and an emotional connection there with Tim Drake and the little girl that is part of Clayface. So just a neat story and has more to it than just fun animation style. But it does beat out Demon Within because I think that this one is more in line with a Batman episode, even though it's done in kind of different styles and has a little bit more fun and doesn't take itself seriously, which makes me think too that I think they were able to get away with some of that because of the Superman shows episodes with like Mxyzptlk that they wouldn't have considered before more of a lighthearted Batman episode, and this gave them an opportunity to do that. But it does feel very much in the vein of Batman, playing into the dark and mysterious kind of elements and sort of the comical, lighthearted side of that.
See? He was just like I said.
So I mentioned several of the Easter eggs and little bonus elements that are hidden in this episode, but by no means is that all of them. So I thought I would ask, what are some of the other Easter eggs that you noticed in this episode? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this episode, then please click the like, thumbs up button. If you want to see more episodes like this, then just hit subscribe, because I have new episodes coming out every Tuesday and Thursday, like next episode, Girls Night Out, so you don't want to miss that. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm Andy Knode. I'll see you soon.